My ex-husband moved in with my sister right after our divorce. Last week, I discovered they'd been having an affair for years. Tonight at my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, she announced she's pregnant with her miracle baby. What she doesn't know is that I have the paternity test showing my ex isn't the father, it's my other sister's husband. Growing up, we were three sisters, me, 35F, Amber, 33F, and Paige, 30F. Our parents raised us in a comfortable middle-class household in suburban Michigan. My dad worked as a high school math teacher, my mom as a nurse. We weren't wealthy, but we never wanted for anything important. We had the typical sister relationship, borrowing clothes without asking, occasional screaming matches over bathroom time, but ultimately deep love and support. At least, that's what I believed. I met Mark during my sophomore year of college. He was charming, ambitious, and handsome, the kind of guy who could work a room and make everyone feel special. My family adored him from the start. My parents thought he was polite and respectful. My sisters found him hilarious and cool. He slipped into our family dynamic so seamlessly that sometimes it felt like he'd always been there. We married after graduation. I started my career in physical therapy while Mark pursued law school. Those early years were tough, money was tight, our schedules rarely aligned, and the stress of building careers while maintaining a marriage took its toll. Still, I thought we were happy. We had date nights when we could afford them, weekend getaways to nearby state parks when we couldn't. We talked about children, bought a modest starter home, and planned our future together. The cracks started appearing around our 5th anniversary. Mark became distant, working later and later hours at his law firm. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone. The intimacy between us faded like a slow leak I couldn't quite locate to patch. I blamed his job, my job, the normal progression of marriage past the honeymoon phase. I suggested counseling. He reluctantly agreed but never fully engaged with the process. When I found the first receipt from a hotel in our own city, I confronted him immediately. He had a ready explanation: a client meeting ran late, the client had been drinking, he didn't want to drive home exhausted. It sounded reasonable enough that I allowed myself to believe it. The second time, his story was slightly different but still plausible. By the third time, I knew in my heart what was happening, but couldn't bring myself to acknowledge it. Meanwhile, my relationship with my sisters remained close, or so I thought. Amber had married Ryan 3 years after my wedding. They seemed perfect together, both teachers, both passionate about children and education, both grounded and practical. They had 2 beautiful boys, ages 6 and 4, and had just bought their forever home. Paige was the free spirit of the family, bouncing between creative jobs and relationships, never quite settling down but bringing energy and excitement wherever she went. Both sisters were my rocks during the deterioration of my marriage. Amber provided practical advice and a shoulder to cry on. Paige offered distraction, taking me out to forget my problems for a night. When Mark finally admitted to an affair with a colleague and asked for a divorce, they rallied around me with unwavering support. The divorce was finalized 18 months ago. Mark and I split our assets fairly amicably, no children complicated matters, and we both just wanted it over with. He left the firm where he'd been working, citing the awkwardness of continuing alongside his affair partner. I kept our house, redecorated to erase the memories, and tried to move forward. 6 months after the divorce, Paige dropped a bombshell: she and Mark had reconnected, and they were dating. She called me first, before telling anyone else in the family, her voice wobbling with a mixture of guilt and defiance. She claimed it had happened organically. They'd run into each other at a coffee shop, started talking, and discovered unexpected chemistry. She insisted nothing had happened during my marriage, that she would never have betrayed me that way. I was devastated. Not just because my ex-husband was now with my sister, but because of what it would mean for our family. Sunday dinners, holidays, birthdays, everything would be tainted by their relationship. Our parents were horrified but ultimately said they wouldn't take sides. Amber was furious on my behalf, promising she'd never accept Mark as Paige's partner. Despite my pain, I tried to be mature. I told Paige that while I couldn't support her relationship, I wouldn't try to turn the family against them. I asked for space and time, which she reluctantly granted. For several months, I avoided family gatherings where they would be present. I focused on rebuilding my life, threw myself into work, joined a hiking group, started dating again casually. Gradually, an uneasy new normal established itself. I would attend smaller family events if assured Mark wouldn't be there. Larger gatherings like Christmas meant carefully choreographed schedules so we wouldn't overlap. It was awkward and painful, but manageable. Until 3 months ago, when Paige and Mark announced they were moving in together. This triggered another family crisis. My parents, who had been cautiously accepting of their dating relationship, expressed concern about the speed of their commitment. Amber remained coldly civil to Mark and increasingly distant from Paige. I retreated again, declining invitations and making excuses to avoid seeing them. The family felt fractured in a way it never had before. Then came the discovery that changed everything. I was having dinner with Amber when her phone kept buzzing with notifications. Apologizing, she checked it quickly, her expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to shock. When I asked what was wrong, she hesitated before showing me the screen. It was an email from her doctor's office, the kind of routine communication that should never have contained life-altering information, but due to some administrative error, it included notes from her husband Ryan's recent physical. Among the routine health metrics was a notation about Ryan being scheduled for a fertility consultation. This was the first Amber had heard of any such appointment. Ryan had never mentioned fertility concerns, and given that they already had 2 children, it seemed strange. She called him immediately, stepping outside for privacy. When she returned, her face was ashen. Ryan had admitted that he'd had a vasectomy, in secret, almost a year ago. He claimed he'd done it because he definitely didn't want more children but knew Amber had been considering a third. Rather than have the difficult conversation, he'd taken the decision into his own hands. Amber was reeling from the betrayal, the lies, the unilateral decision about their family's future. I comforted her as best I could, outraged on her behalf. We strategized about marriage counseling, about whether their relationship could recover from such a fundamental breach of trust. It was nearly midnight when she finally felt calm enough to drive home and confront Ryan properly. The next morning, Amber called me in tears. The vasectomy was just the beginning of the lies. When pressed, Ryan had confessed to an affair. What broke me was hearing who it was with, Paige. My youngest sister had been sleeping with both my ex-husband and my other sister's husband. The timeline Ryan provided was damning. His affair with Paige had started over 2 years ago, well before my marriage to Mark had ended. More disturbing was his revelation that Mark and Paige had also been involved during that same period. The coffee shop meet cute story was a fabrication. My ex-husband and my sister had been having an affair for years, possibly contributing to the breakdown of my marriage, and had continued their relationship in secret until they felt enough time had passed to officially get together. I felt physically ill. The betrayal was so multi-layered, so calculated, it defied comprehension. Amber and I met again that day, comparing notes and filling in gaps in our understanding. We wondered who else knew, our parents? Other friends? Had we been the only ones in the dark? We decided to confront Paige together. When we arrived at her apartment, thankfully while Mark was at work, she initially tried to deny everything. The calculating look in her eyes as she formulated her lies confirmed everything. When we revealed what Ryan had told us, her composure cracked. She broke down, not with remorse but with anger that she'd been exposed. Her justifications were both pathetic and infuriating. She claimed she'd always been in Mark's shadow, that I'd had everything she wanted, the stable career, the gorgeous husband, the respect of our parents. She admitted to pursuing Mark initially out of jealousy, then claimed she'd fallen in love with him. The affair with Ryan had been about excitement, about feeling desired by someone who wasn't supposed to want her. What hurt most wasn't just the affairs themselves but the years of deception, the sisterly advice Paige had offered during my marital problems, knowing she was partly causing them, the sympathetic ear she provided to Amber about parenting challenges while sleeping with Amber's husband behind her back. The calculated decision to pursue a public relationship with Mark after my divorce, pretending it was new. The countless family gatherings where she'd played both supportive sister and secret betrayer. Amber and I left Paige's apartment shell-shocked. Our family, as we'd known it, was effectively destroyed. Amber returned home to continue the painful process with Ryan. They were in limbo, unsure if their marriage could be salvaged, especially for their children's sake. I retreated to my house, alternating between rage, grief, and emotional numbness. I chose not to confront Mark. He was no longer my husband, no longer my problem. His betrayal, while painful, wasn't surprising given how our marriage had ended. What haunted me was how thoroughly I'd been deceived by my own sister, someone I'd trusted implicitly, someone whose shoulder I'd cried on about the very man she was sleeping with. For several weeks, an uneasy stalemate existed. Paige attempted to contact both of us repeatedly, leaving tearful voicemails and sending lengthy emails that mixed apologies with justifications. Our parents knew something serious had happened but not the full extent. We told them we discovered Paige had been seeing Mark during my marriage, but spared them the details about Ryan to give Amber space to decide how to proceed with her marriage. Then, just as the initial shock was beginning to fade, Amber called me with news that sent me reeling again. Ryan had moved out temporarily at her insistence, but had been in contact with Paige throughout the separation. During one particularly honest conversation with Amber, he revealed that Paige had recently discovered she was pregnant, and was unsure of the paternity. The timing overlapped with both her relationship with Mark and her affair with Ryan. She had asked Ryan to take a paternity test secretly, without Mark's knowledge. The results had confirmed Ryan was the father. Paige had sworn Ryan to secrecy, telling him she planned to pass the child off as Mark's. She didn't want to lose Mark or complicate her newly legitimate relationship with him. Amber, gutted by this fresh betrayal but determined to protect her children's stability if possible, had convinced Ryan to give her the paternity test results. She forwarded them to me, clinical, unambiguous proof of the tangled web of lies our family was caught in. I sat with this information for days, unsure what to do with it. The moral implications were staggering. This child, my niece or nephew, would be born into a foundation of lies. Mark would raise a child believing it was his own, while the actual father, who was married to another of my sisters and had 2 children already, would be present in the child's life as an uncle. The deception seemed cruel not just to Mark and the unborn child, but to Amber's children as well, who would unknowingly have a half-sibling being raised in another household. While I was still processing this information, an invitation arrived. My parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary with a small family dinner at their home. They specifically requested that all conflicts be set aside for this one evening, pleading that after 4 decades of marriage, they deserved to have their children together harmoniously. I couldn't refuse my parents on such an important occasion, even knowing the toxic undercurrents that would be flowing beneath the celebratory surface. Amber decided to attend as well, bringing her children but not Ryan, who had agreed to the arrangement. Paige confirmed she and Mark would be there. The evening began awkwardly, with forced politeness and careful distance maintained between the fractured relationships. Our parents, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the tension, reminisced about their marriage, shared old photos, and encouraged us to remember happy family moments. It was surreal, like watching actors perform a play about a loving family while knowing the terrible reality backstage. After dinner, as my father opened a bottle of champagne for a toast, Paige stood up and tapped her glass. With tears in her eyes, tears I now recognized as practiced performance rather than genuine emotion, she announced that she and Mark had wonderful news to share. She was pregnant with what she called their miracle baby. The calculated timing of the announcement, hijacking our parents' anniversary celebration, was typical Paige. So was the performance that followed, how they hadn't been trying, how it must have been meant to be, how excited they were to expand the family. Mark beamed beside her, completely unaware he was not the father of the child she carried. Our parents were initially stunned, then cautiously pleased. They hugged Paige, shook Mark's hand, and tried to include Amber and me in the celebration. Amber's face was a mask of controlled emotion. I felt nothing but cold certainty about what needed to happen next. As the impromptu celebration continued, I quietly retrieved my purse and the envelope I'd brought with me, the one containing copies of the paternity test results. I had debated endlessly whether to reveal the truth, weighing the pain it would cause against the ongoing deception. In that moment, watching Paige bask in congratulations for a pregnancy built on lies, watching Mark's innocent joy at impending fatherhood of a child that wasn't his, I made my decision. I stood up, envelope in hand, and cleared my throat. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. I reminded myself that I hadn't created this situation, Paige and Ryan had. I wasn't responsible for the fallout, they were. This child deserved to begin life with truth, not convenient lies. I have something to add to this announcement, I said calmly, looking directly at Paige, whose expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. She registered the envelope in my hand. Mark, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you are not the father of this baby. The chaos that followed was both terrible and necessary. Mark's disbelief, Paige's desperate denials, my parents' confusion. I handed Mark the paternity test results, watching his understanding dawn on his face. When he demanded to know who the father was, I looked to Amber, giving her the choice of how this part of the truth should be revealed. She stood, shoulders straight despite the pain etched on her face, and simply said, "It's Ryan. My husband." The evening devolved completely after that. Mark stormed out after confronting Paige, who alternated between blaming everyone else and begging him to stay. My parents sat in stunned silence, the celebration of their 4 decades of commitment overshadowed by the spectacular implosion of their daughters' relationships. Amber gathered her children, who were thankfully too young to fully understand what was happening, and left quietly. I stayed long enough to help my shell-shocked parents clean up the debris of the dinner and the family. As I was leaving, my father asked me a question that haunts me still. Where did we go wrong with you girls? How did we raise you to hurt each other this way? I had no answer for him. I still don't. That was 3 weeks ago. The aftermath has been as messy as expected. Mark immediately moved out of the house he shared with Paige and filed for an annulment of their recent marriage, citing fraud. Ryan has moved back in with Amber temporarily, not a reconciliation, but an attempt to provide stability for their children while they determine next steps. Paige has reached out to all of us with increasingly desperate messages, portraying herself as the victim of circumstances rather than their architect. Our parents are heartbroken, struggling to understand how their family shattered so completely. They've suggested family therapy, which seems both woefully inadequate and absolutely necessary. I've agreed to participate, not out of any desire to reconcile with Paige, but to help my parents process their grief. As for me, I found unexpected clarity in the aftermath of this family explosion. For years, I blamed myself for the failure of my marriage, wondering what I could have done differently, how I could have been more attentive or understanding. Now I understand that while no marriage is perfect, mine was undermined from the outside by people I trusted implicitly. I've also gained perspective on family bonds. Blood connection doesn't automatically confer loyalty or love. Sometimes family members are the ones most capable of hurting us because we let them closest to our vulnerabilities. I no longer believe I owe Paige forgiveness simply because we share parents. Some betrayals cut too deep for easy reconciliation. The most surprising outcome has been the strengthening of my relationship with Amber. Though we were close before, weathering this storm together has forged a deeper bond between us. We check in daily, supporting each other through the legal and emotional fallout. We've discussed the possibility of both moving away from our hometown, making a fresh start somewhere without the weight of these memories. The ultrasound photo arrived yesterday, Paige's desperate attempt to use the innocent child as leverage for forgiveness. She sent copies to everyone, our parents, Mark, Ryan, Amber, me. Attached was a note begging us to remember that whatever mistakes she'd made, this baby deserves a family. She's right about that much, at least. This child deserves better than the tangled web of lies and betrayal they've been born into. Ryan has promised to take responsibility for his child, though what that means practically remains to be seen. Mark has cut contact with everyone involved. Our parents are cautiously preparing for a grandchild while trying to navigate the fractured relationships surrounding its arrival. As for me, I'm slowly rebuilding. I've accepted that the idealized family of my childhood memories no longer exists, perhaps never did. I'm learning to create boundaries that protect me while allowing for the possibility of healing over time. I'm dating again, cautiously, having learned the hard way that sometimes those closest to you are the ones you should trust least. The family reunion plan for this summer has been cancelled. No one said why, no one needed to. Perhaps someday we'll gather again with genuine smiles and open hearts. But the path from here to there is long and uncertain. What I know for certain is this: family is complicated, love is imperfect, and forgiveness is neither automatic nor obligatory. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from those who hurt you, even, perhaps especially, when they share your blood. My ex-husband moved in with my sister after our divorce. My sister is pregnant with a child fathered by my other sister's husband. Our family may never recover from these betrayals. But I will. That's the only part of this story I can control, and the part I'm focusing on now.